Dr. Evelyn was a brilliant scientist, known for her groundbreaking research and discoveries. From university to her PhD program, Evelyn was well renowned for her ability to articulate her positions on her research and received high marks for her work. It began with a faint whisper that Evelyn heard while working late in her lab. "Dr. Evelyn, you are a failure," it said. Startled, she looked around, but the lab was empty. She tried to ignore it, but the voice surfaced again, only a couple of minutes later. Now that she had heard it twice and knew that no one else was in the lab, she became uneasy. It was disturbing for a woman with no one else around to be in her position this late in the evening. The coming days would be much the same, with Dr. Evelyn having a productive day and staying late to take advantage of the quiet time to do some planning and review of her work from the day. But the voice would return each night, more and more frequently repeating the disturbing accusations. "Dr. Evelyn, you are a failure." This terrified Evelyn, but she refused to let it show, putting her head down and working faster and more diligently to finish her work before she left the building. Evelyn began to feel a cold presence in the lab after dark, especially near her workbench. The whispers continued, suggesting that her research was flawed. "You will destroy them all," they taunted, and this especially bothered Dr. Evelyn because she took such pride in her attention to detail and thorough review of her work. Evelyn became obsessed with her experiments, spending hours in the lab. She started seeing ghostly figures in the lab, their faces filled with accusation and pain. The whispers grew louder, haunting her every step. Years ago, one of Evelyn's experiments had gone wrong, resulting in a study participant's death. The memory of that incident had always haunted her, but now it seemed to blend with her current fears, making her question her abilities and her sanity. Desperate, Evelyn confided in her colleagues and even talked to a therapist. But no one believed her about the voice and the ghosts. They suggested she was just under stress and needed a break. Her family worried about her state of mind, urging her to take some time off. But Evelyn knew what she heard and what she saw, and she was not losing it. Like a typical researcher, she was determined to get to the bottom of this. The whispers became more insistent. "You cannot escape your guilt," they cried. "You are responsible, Dr. Evelyn. You will never recover from this. Shame!" Evelyn started seeing the ghostly figures more frequently, their spectral forms following her everywhere. The cold presence became unbearable, chilling her to the bone. Her research began to suffer. She became paranoid and jumpy, seeing ghostly figures in the shadows. She couldn't tell what was real and what was a figment of her tortured mind. She started doubting her sanity, wondering if she was truly losing her grip on reality. One night, as she was alone in the lab, the whispers became a roar. "Join us, Dr. Evelyn," they demanded. She saw the ghost of the deceased study participant, their face twisted in pain and sorrow. Evelyn screamed, but no one else was in the building to hear her cries. Evelyn ran out of the lab, desperate to escape the voice and the ghosts. She drove recklessly, tears streaming down her face. She locked herself in her house and ran to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. She jumped onto the bed, begging for it to stop. Just as she was about to give in to despair, her house filled with a blinding light. The whispers turned into a furious hiss. "You cannot escape us, Dr. Evelyn!" they roared. Evelyn felt a draft moving through her home. It was eerie and unnerving. She had never experienced anything like this, and living alone, she was even more terrified. Evelyn crouched in a corner, covering her eyes and begging for reprieve, but the voices continued, furious and accusatory. It had already destroyed her confidence and sense of security. What more did the ghost want? When would this end? And why was it so demanding now after all these years? Dr. Evelyn grabbed the comforter and covered herself as she scooted closer to the headboard. It was the best fortress she could find in her position, and it was there that she would cry herself to sleep. Evelyn awoke in the early hours of the morning, exhausted and depressed. All was quiet, no voices, no ghosts. What had happened last night? She wondered. Would the voices be back in the lab at the end of the day? Would she ever be released from their wrath? Only time would tell. There was something evil lurking in that lab, something that fed on Dr. Evelyn's deepest fears and insecurities. Evelyn decided to gather other scientists who had been involved in that study which went awry years ago. Although Dr. Evelyn was the only one who reported hearing voices and seeing the ghost of the deceased, they found strength in each other's stories, as each of them admitted to having some level of guilt from working on that project. They needed one another, and together they would fight the darkness and reclaim their passion for discoveries to bring good to this world. And you, dear listener, have you ever heard whispers in the silence of an empty room? Have you ever felt a cold presence that chills you to the bone? You're not alone in your fear. There's something out there, something evil that delights in tormenting the innocent. Don't let it win. Find others who believe you. Together you can fight the darkness. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. Join us on TikTok and YouTube for more chilling chronicles, if you dare.